Right now in my hands, here in Okinawa, there is a handsaw so old the maker's stamp has nearly worn away from the heel of the blade. 10 minutes ago, this saw could not have cut through warm butter. It wandered off every line. It wore my arm out in a dozen strokes, and it left the wood chewed and splintered instead of cut. I did not sharpen it with a machine. I did not send it anywhere or spend a single dollar to replace it. I sat at this bench with 3 small hand tools, most of them older than I am, and I am about to draw this same blade through a piece of pine, and I want you to listen to the sound it makes now, because it is the sound of a saw that has just been born again. That sound, clean, quick, almost silent, is the entire secret I am going to teach you today. The old Japanese way of bringing a dead saw back to life, sharper than the day it left the factory, for less than the cost of your lunch. My name is Kenji Takara. I am built 81 years old, coops and I have lived my whole life on the island of Okinawa in the far south of Japan. And every single one of those years, I have cut wood with saws that are older than my own children. My grandfather owned perhaps 4 saws in his entire life, each one sharpened so many hundreds of times that the blade had visibly narrowed with age, like a river stone worn thin by water. He did not own a sharpening machine. He did not need one. In the villages of my youth, every serious craftsman carried his own small file and his own small tools for the care of his blades. And a man's saw was sharpened as routinely and as automatically as a woman's kitchen knife, a habit, not an event. What I will show you today is not a rare skill. It was, for most of human history, simply how a person who owned a saw was expected to look after it. But before I show you, let me tell you the part that should make you a little angry. Walk into the hardware store today and ask about your dull saw and watch what happens. In most stores, nobody will even offer to sharpen it. The skill has nearly vanished from behind the counter. What they will offer, cheerfully, is a new saw, $20, $30, $40, gleaming in its plastic clamshell. And here is the design behind that cheerful offer. The great majority of saws sold today have teeth stamped by machine from hardened steel, hardened so aggressively that a file cannot touch them. These are called hard-point saws, and they are marketed as a convenience, never needs sharpening. But read that promise again, slowly, and hear what it truly means. It does not mean the saw will stay sharp forever. It means the saw cannot be sharpened at all, by you or by anyone, ever. So when it dulls, as every saw eventually must, your only path is the store. They have not freed you from a chore. They have removed your choice. A saw that can be sharpened, cared for, and handed to your grandson in 40 years' time earns a company nothing after the first sale. A saw that must be thrown away and repurchased every few years is a customer for life. That is the entire design, hidden inside a friendly little phrase on the packaging. Now, here is where almost everyone goes wrong, and it is the single reason so many people try to sharpen an old saw once, fail, and give up forever, convinced the skill is lost. They believe sharpening a saw is one task. It is not. It is 2 entirely separate tasks, done in a particular order, and skipping the first one dooms the second, no matter how well you do it. The first task is setting, bending the teeth, alternating left and right, so the cut they make is slightly wider than the thickness of the blade itself, giving the blade room to pass through the wood without binding or dragging. The second task is sharpening, putting a fine cutting edge on each individual tooth with a file. A saw with sharp teeth but no set will jam and smoke in the cut, however keen those edges are. A saw with good set but dull edges will tear and struggle, however freely it slides. You must do both in that order: set first, sharpen second. And nearly every person who tried sharpening once and it didn't work skipped the first step entirely, filed dull teeth to a fine edge, and wondered why the saw still fought them in the wood. Understand this one thing, and you have already gone further than most, and more important than either task. Before you touch a single tool to a single tooth, you must know, by looking, which saw in your hand is even capable of this rebirth. Turn your saw teeth up to the light and look closely, tooth by tooth. If the very tips of the teeth are dull, but the metal beneath still shines silver gray and takes a scratch from your fingernail, that saw is soft steel, hand set, made to be filed, and it is about to become sharper than it has ever been in its life. But if the teeth are small, uniform, machine-stamped triangles, and a file skates across them without biting no matter how hard you press, that is a hardened, hard-point blade, and no amount of skill will file it. That saw's only fair fate is honest retirement, perhaps as a rough garden tool, while you turn your care toward a blade that deserves it. Knowing this difference in 30 seconds, before you spend an hour trying to file steel that cannot be filed, is worth more than anything else I will tell you today. So, assuming your saw has passed that test, and your fingernail can scratch its teeth, let us begin with the tools, for they are humble and few. A saw set, a small hand-squeezed tool that bends each tooth to a precise, even angle, costs $15 to $25 saw file, and one will outlive size to match your saw's teeth. This is the single purchase of the whole fine-toothed saw, and it earns its keep for the very first saw. A simple clamp or vise to hold the blade dead still while you work. Even 2 boards and a couple of clamps will serve if you have nothing better. And a wire brush and a little oil for the cleaning that always comes first. Begin with the cleaning, because rust and pitch and old grime hide the true state of the teeth and dull your file before it ever touches steel. Wipe the blade with a rag and a little oil, and where rust has taken hold, you already know my kitchen vinegar method from an earlier lesson. That same overnight bath restores an old saw blade just as it restored my shears, bringing the true bright steel back into the light, where you can finally see what you are working with. Now, clamp the saw firmly along its length, teeth just proud of the jaws of your vise or your board clamp, so the blade cannot flex or sing as you work it. A blade that vibrates under the file will not take an even edge no matter how skilled your hand. Step 1. The set. Working down the length of the blade, take your saw set and tooth by tooth, squeeze the tool over each one in turn. Every other tooth bends to the left. The ones between it bend to the right. In the alternating pattern the teeth were originally cut to follow. Most saw sets have a small adjustable gauge or stop that controls how far each tooth bends. For the general work of a homestead saw, a light, moderate set is right, enough that the cut is visibly wider than the blade's back, not so much that the teeth look wild or splayed. If your saw's old set has simply worn shallow with decades of use, rather than vanished entirely, you may need only a light pass to restore it, tooth by tooth, rather than reset it from nothing. Go slowly. Teeth are surprisingly stubborn creatures the first time in years, only now, and a rushed hand bends some teeth twice. Here is the rhythm the old sawyers taught which shows itself later, and it has not changed. That wanders in the cut. File every other tooth, the sharpening, working in one direction down the length of the blade. Say, all the teeth that are set away from you. using the same number of steady strokes on each tooth, following the existing angle already cut into that tooth, rather than inventing a new one. 2 or 3 firm, even strokes per tooth is usual. Count them and give every tooth the same count, for an uneven hand creates a few very sharp teeth doing all the work and many dull ones doing nothing, and the saw fails again within a week. When you reach the end of the blade, turn the saw around in the clamp or walk to its other side and file the remaining teeth, the ones set toward you, in the same steady rhythm, same stroke count, same care. Let the file do the cutting. Press only lightly and lift it on the return stroke rather than dragging it backward, which dulls the file itself. This is unhurried work, an old man's work if I am honest with you, but a full saw rarely takes more than 20 or 30 minutes once your hand finds its rhythm, and that rhythm comes quickly. When you are done, wipe the blade clean of filings, run a light coat of oil down its length to guard against the very rust we discussed, and try it in a scrap of wood. You will feel it before you see it, the blade drawing itself into the cut almost on its own, sawdust flying instead of smoke rising, your arm doing a fraction of the work it did an hour before. That is a saw reborn. Now, the extra layers, the things even a careful beginner overlooks. First, match your file to your teeth, and never force it. A file too coarse for fine cross-cut teeth will tear the delicate points right off them. A file too fine for a large, rough rip saw will take an age and barely touch the work. If you are unsure of your saw's tooth count, count how many teeth sit within 1 inch of blade. Under 7 or 8, use a slightly coarser file. Above 10 or 12, go finer. And a file that begins to skate rather than bite, no matter how you press, is a worn-out file, not a hardened saw. Files are consumable, a few dollars each, and a good sharpener keeps 2 or 3 fresh ones on the shelf rather than fighting a tired one to save 50 cents. Second, the very first tooth and the very last tooth deserve your closest attention. These end teeth take the brunt of every starting stroke when a saw is first set to the wood and dragged unevenly before it settles into its rhythm, and they dull fastest and bend most easily. Check them last, after the whole blade is done, and give them an extra light touch if they lag behind their neighbors. A saw that starts a cut cleanly is a saw that finishes it cleanly too. Third, and this is the layer that turns a good sharpening into a lasting one, touch it up before it truly dulls, exactly as I taught you with the kitchen knife. A saw does not go from keen to useless in a day. It fades slowly, cut by cut, and if you give it a light pass, a few strokes per tooth, no full resetting needed, every few months of regular use, before the edge is truly gone. Let me tell you now about my grandfather's own saw becomes a rare event, taught me this rather than a constant chore, because it is not really a story about touched up his saws the way my grandmother touched up her knife, no larger than a book, lightly that held his before the dullness ever had the chance to announce itself. And a stub of candle maintained this rubbed along the blade's back to help it slide smoothly before the blade itself has worn thin enough to retire. In his shed, the very blade in my hands today has likely been sharpened more times than I can count. He would take down whichever saw had begun to complain to him. For a good craftsman can hear a dulling saw the way a mother hears a child's cough, and he would clamp it to the bench and work it slowly by lamplight, unhurried, while I sat on an overturned crate and watched. He never once in my whole boyhood took a saw to a shop. When he died, that saw, the very one warming in my hand today, passed to my father and then to me, and I could not begin to guess How many hundreds of times its teeth have been touched by a file across 3 generations of hands, mine among them. And yet it cuts, this morning, as cleanly as any blade in any hardware store window. Perhaps more cleanly, for it has been shaped, tooth by patient tooth, by people who knew exactly what they were doing and loved the doing of it. Saw with and that is the larger truth I want to leave with you today. For the price we have been taught quietly and thoroughly for the rest of your life tool is a dead tool. Is to reclaim something that when the edge goes, world has the object's usefulness goes with it, and the only sensible answer is the store, dignified ability. But a saw's teeth are not its soul. Its soul is the steel beneath again and again, patient and enduring. Your only choice is waiting only for a file, that a little set, and a little of your time. Waste nothing, not the steel, not the money, not the years of cutting still folded into an old blade's edge, and not the quiet, patient satisfaction of hearing a saw sing again beneath your own hand. So tell me, in the comments below, where in this world do you live, and what old saw is hanging in your shed or garage right now, waiting for its edge to be reborn? A hand saw from your father? A rusty rip saw found at an estate sale? Something you nearly threw away last spring? Tell me your place and your saw, because I read every message that comes to me, and I would dearly love to know who among you clamps a blade to the bench this weekend and files their very first tooth. And the next time we sit together, I will show you the small wooden box itself, how my grandfather organized every file, every saw set, every small sharpening tool he owned, so that nothing rusted, nothing was ever lost, and any